I wanted to talk about how much it has costed me to keep my 20-year-old car running. Usually people assume that the maintenance I've been putting in on my car is preventative, but actually everything has been completely unavoidable, and slowly I've just been doing everything that I need to get it in running condition. So of course, with having a car this old, I am the third owner and I am on year 4 of owning it. So for everything that I have as far as documented maintenance is not everything, as I have lost a decent amount of receipts and I just don't entirely remember everything that I've done to get it to where it is today. But as far as everything I just wanted to break that down and everything that I remember as well into one cost so that you guys can get a good idea of how much it is to keep a car like this up and running. So with that being said, most of the parts and the maintenance and the labor combined are much cheaper than you'd find on other cars, just because the parts are so easily accessible. Off the top of my head, I remember the first thing I got done to it is had the exhaust manifold welded. I do recall it being cracked in 2 different places, so I just had to have that welded. I couldn't stand how awful it sounded, and it was just really undrivable and really embarrassing, so that's something I got done I think the first day of owning it, and I paid around $300. That is what you would expect to pay for a job like that, and since then I've had no issues. So the next biggest thing, or one of the bigger projects I had to do, was the steering rack, and that one was around $300. Again, I paid $278 for that, and that was just for the part. And I did a video on that one, but I don't know if I ever talked about how much I spent, so there it is. That was $278. I actually completely take that back because I forgot the biggest and most annoying thing about this car would be the AC. If you care about that, if you want to rip it out, it really doesn't matter, but I spent hundreds of dollars on AC compressors, so I actually replaced it about 5 times, and so far the last one has held up, but my biggest issue was that I got a remanufactured one, and of course it did not hold up. I think it lasted maybe the summer. It might have actually lasted me 1 full summer. At this point, I don't care enough to really run the AC. With a car this old, I don't want to push it past its limits and end up having more issues, so I haven't gone all out with repairing the AC. It's more content just leaving the windows down and not being too bothered by that and not having to worry about replacing it again. So I believe that was around $400 to $500 just on AC diagnostic and several different AC compressors. I currently need to rip out the heater core, and I just don't want to take apart the dash, and I haven't got myself to be dedicated to care enough to do that. So moving on, I did also replace the cooling system. I highly recommend doing that on this car if it hasn't been done by a previous owner. Everyone who previously had this car in their care just very much neglected it, and I ended up replacing the radiator, the pump, and all of the hoses as well. But again, in comparison to other cars, it really wasn't too big of a deal. I paid around $260 for that plus a $75 diagnostic. I also did the radiator fan, which was $65. I'm already forgetting everything that I've gone over so far, but it's just impossible to remember everything that I've done. I just know most recently I went ahead and replaced the idle air control. I cleaned out the throttle body, and I also did the fuel filter. This was because I was having horrible startup issues and it was just a complete nightmare, but I have absolutely no information as far as physical receipts on how much I spent on all of that, so I might go ahead and add that later, but I think the receipts are somewhere just completely lost in my car and I really don't know where they are. Out of fear of this becoming way too rambly, I'm going to try to wrap it up, and I will add the last few things that I can think of or have documented. So I also had to at some point replace the starter, and that was $80. That was about 3 or so years ago now, so haven't had to do that again, luckily. I also had the transmission inspected, so I was having an issue shifting gears. It was first to second. And it ended up being my differential, which I replaced. I replaced the whole rear axle, and that was a 7.5. I may have some clips of that, which I can insert.
I have a feeling once he gets the Xbox, he's just going to keep it up.
But for the transmission service, I think I ended up spending over $100. That was for a mount that they went ahead and replaced for me, and then I also flushed the fluid a couple times just because it kept leaking. I replaced the pan twice, and so of course the fluid along with that. So I don't know exactly how much that costed me, but I think you could include that with routine maintenance, so I won't include that for my grand total. So obviously I'm not going to include oil changes, which run me about 140 bucks each time. I'm not going to include brake pads or alignments. So for everything that I've done to get this car in running condition, I did buy it running. It just wasn't safe. It was definitely a hazard at that point. Everything that I've done to the car to get it to the point that it's at where I can drive it relatively confidently. I don't daily it, but I have. All of this maintenance that I've put in, I believe I am sitting around $2,000, if not less. So that's pretty affordable to have a car in good running condition, especially for its age. I'm very happy that I haven't spent too much on it, just because I know I am going to end up replacing the engine. So hopefully this was more informative for you, or you got some information out of this and it wasn't a total waste of time. But thank you for watching to the end, and don't forget to like and subscribe.
Okay.